Hi guys, and welcome back. My PCBs finally arrived from JLCPCB. This is the first time I've had PCBs made by JLCPCB, and let's check it out. So this PCB is my attempt at making an MBC1 logic Gameboy cartridge. So this features logic gates to control the memory banks for the EEPROM. Instead of salvaging an MBC1 chip from an original Game Boy cartridge, I opted to make one based on logic gates. Now the schematics are available online. You can Google it, and it's free. So the parts are a 47 kilo ohm resistor, a 512 kilobyte EEPROM, 20 nanofarad capacitor, and some ICs, the 74HC08D, the 74HC27D, 74HC174D, 74HC32D, and the 74HC00D. These parts are readily available online, so I bought mine online from China, of course. So let's begin. I have prepared my flux and my soldering lead, and I also have my USB soldering iron. This is my go-to soldering iron for very small components. So I typically start by soldering one leg of this tiny IC just to secure it to the board, and then I could solder each of the legs onto the solder pads. I am wearing a 10X jeweler's loop. I switched to another soldering iron because my USB soldering iron wasn't getting hot enough. Oh, by the way, most of the components, or all of the components rather, are surface mounted. So all of the ICs, all of the components are soldered on one side of the board only. So here is the EEPROM. It's a 512 kilobyte EEPROM. It's an AM29F040B by AMD. So I switched back to my USB soldering iron since I needed a thin soldering tip just to get under the legs of the EEPROM, since they're curved inward under the chip itself. So this is a PLCC32 footprint. Now I could have used a socket here to easily replace the EEPROM, but I found that the sockets I have are too tall and closing the cartridge case would be impossible. There are low profile PLCC32 sockets, but they're not readily available where I'm from, and they're a bit more expensive than the regular PLCC32 sockets. Now soldering this takes quite a while, as there are 32 pins and I have to solder each pin. There are other methods of doing this, like the solder paste method and the hot air solder station. I do have those, but my very first attempt in doing that had very undesirable results. I have more consistent results soldering each of the pins by hand. I'm soldering the capacitor here. I'm using a regular capacitor instead of an SMD or surface mount capacitor. It works fine. The capacitor is mounted sideways onto the solder pads. Now I'm mounting the resistor. This is quite a creative way of mounting a resistor, since the pads that are on the board that I designed are too small. So I had to creatively bend the legs of this regular 1/4 watt 47 kilo ohm resistor so that it would be the legs would be on the right place for the solder pads. And there, it's finally done. Now for the case, this is a generic cartridge case. And what do you know, the board fits perfectly. Time to test it with my modded Gameboy DMG with an IPS display. That's a good sign. It's out of frame, but I did see the Nintendo logo, but the game unfortunately did not load. So there's the Nintendo logo. It appears just fine, scrolls down, but nothing. At this point, I was quite worried that there was a design flaw on the board, but this is the first time I have populated the PCB, so there's an off chance that the soldering process wasn't done well, and some of the legs of the components might not have been soldered properly. So I'm opening the game cartridge and inspecting my work to see if I missed any legs, or maybe some of the components were not soldered properly. and I did find a few suspect solder joints, so I reflowed those. By the way, these schematics are from 1997, and as far as I know, no one has ever tried making the circuit board for that schematic. Maybe someone did but did not publish it, but so far from my online research, no one has ever made something similar. So I wasn't quite sure if the schematics were accurate up until this point. So after reflowing the components, I was pleasantly surprised that yes, it works. And there was a big sigh of relief at this point. And of course, the game I chose to test this thing is my favorite DMG game, Mega Man 5. As mentioned a while back, the EEPROM on this cartridge was pre-programmed, so before I soldered it on the PCB, I programmed it, or rather I burned the game on it using my Willem programmer. And yeah, pretty stoked that it worked. The next thing I need to test would be whether or not the cartridge can be flashed or reprogrammed using my Gameboy cartridge flasher. So there you have it, my MBC1 Logic Gameboy flash card. So if you like this video or enjoyed it, please hit the like button, subscribe, leave me a comment, and share the video. Stay safe, and as always, enjoy.